Just before the election, Anthony Albanese made this promise.
I'm in it to change the country, and that's what I intend to do.
But both his revolutions to change Australia, what a frightening ambition that is, are going terribly. One is the voice, of course, but the other is his green energy revolution. Total disaster. Today's inflation figures showed we're now paying 16% more for our electricity than a year ago, even after you factor in all the government bill relief handouts, to cut the cost and ease it for the poor. And that's not all. The Snowy 2.0 scheme, another sign of trouble just today. That's a kind of giant battery for green power, Malcolm Turnbull's idea, has now blown out again. It was meant to cost $2 billion, then $6 billion, now $12 billion, and still years from completion, with a tunnelling machine stuck underground, has been for months. Joining me is National Senator Matt Canavan, the former Resources Minister. Matt, I really should do a daily call out of the latest signs this green revolution is heading over the cliff. At some stage, Energy Minister Chris Bowen has got to accept that his big push to get us off coal-fired power onto wind and solar is now totally out of control, higher prices, less electricity, or do you think we've crossed the Rubicon, it's too late already?
Well, I don't think it's too late. I don't think it's ever too late, Andrew. But unfortunately for us, the Energy Minister, Chris Bowen, seems obsessed, showing the obsession of a zealot. He's a green energy zealot here, and I'm not sure if any facts, data, pain from Australian consumers is going to change his mind. He seems hell-bent, as you say, in taking us over this cliff. We can all see what's going on. I mean, just look at the Snowy Hydro stuff. Do you remember a few years ago, Andrew, I pushed really hard for us to build a coal-fired power station. You could see all the old ones were shutting down. We didn't have other technologies to replace it. We didn't have cheap gas anymore. The Bass Strait's dried up. And other countries around the world were building new Healy, high-efficiency, low-emission coal-fired power stations. Let's do it. We've got a little bit of money to get it going. And we're all told, the naysayers told us that, oh, look, it'll just take too long. It'll take too long to build a coal-fired power station. They said it could take 5, 6 years. And guess what? This was 5 or 6 years ago that I was pushing this campaign. So if we'd made that decision then to plant the tree, to get the coal-fired power station going, we'd be bearing fruit right now. We'd be getting cheap, high-efficiency, low-emission power. Yet instead we're stuck with what seems to be probably the biggest white elephant in our nation's history in Snowy Hydro 2.0. Keep in mind, we're only doing this to support renewables. This now $12 billion cost, which was meant to be $2 billion, there'll probably be another $10 to $15 billion of transmission lines on top of that needed for Snowy 2.0. So this $20 to $30 billion cost now is all to support the so-called renewable energy power, which is, we're told, is the cheapest form of power in the world. It's just laughable. You can see your power bill. Renewable energy ain't cheap.
It's so true, and almost every part of the revolution, of the Energy Minister's revolution, is way over budget or stalled. Whether it's green hydrogen, transmission lines delayed or costing 3 times more than first thought. The Snowy 2.0, on it goes. It's just insane. But what scared me, Matt, is that Michelle Bullock, now she's the woman the government has just appointed as the new Reserve Bank governor. What she's saying about this, she last night gave her first big speech after being appointed, and after I thought, no wonder they appointed her. She is still backing this green push, even while admitting it's going to cost us and could probably leave us without enough electricity. Here she is.
Coal-fired power plants are scheduled to be shut down over the next 3 decades. Now, this could put upward pressure on energy prices if coal plant closures are not matched by renewable supply and storage. And there is much uncertainty here.
And in fact, she says we're getting only 1/3 of the investment in green energy that we actually do need anyway if you're going to replace all these coal-fired power stations. How can a Reserve Bank governor go along with this dangerous gamble when you already see the wheels falling off the machine and flying all over the road?
Well, I think there's the one thing that I did take away from Michelle Bullock's speech is that climate change is the greatest excuse for our major policymakers since they were in school. It's the dog ate my homework for them now, that where they lose control of inflation, they cost us all thousands of dollars more on our mortgage because of their mismanagement of monetary policy. It's not their fault, Andrew. It's climate change. Climate change did this to us instead. And I think she's revealed a bit too much here, Andrew, because she's effectively said that shutting down our coal-fired power stations, I mean, to give her a due, she said there's a risk, there's uncertainty here, that power prices will go up. Well, that's not what Chris Bowen's saying. That's not what the government's saying. The government's saying that we'll end up with cheaper power by shutting down our coal-fired power stations because, as they say, I think it's a trademark term now, renewable energy is the cheapest form of power. They say it over and over and over. Well, clearly the Governor of the Reserve Bank doesn't share that view, or is at least not as confident as Mr Bowen in that view. And so I give her credit for at least that, for at least opening up this window a little bit into what is actually happening here, because I know a lot of people are very worried about our energy system. They're very worried about whether or not we'll be able to keep the lights on over the next few decades. That will mean, of course, higher prices for all of us, higher than we already have now today. And it also risks the strength of our manufacturing industry and our ability to defend ourselves. It is just totally absurd. China is building 2 coal-fired power stations a week. They're now using our coal again to fuel those power stations. Why don't we just build a couple of those, get it done, so we can at least not have these risks hanging over us, like Michelle Bullock says?
Yeah, but what also stuns me, Matt, is that this incoming Reserve Bank governor seems, despite what you say, she does acknowledge the risk, but she also seems keen to exaggerate and totally misrepresent the science to actually scare people about global warming risks. Have a listen to this.
New technologies are also likely to emerge that could reduce costs and increase efficiencies.
No, that wasn't the one. She actually went on to say we're going to have more frequent cyclones. And that's when our own Bureau of Meteorology is quite clear we are getting fewer cyclones and fewer bad cyclones. Why would she be saying the opposite?
Well, not only that, the IPCC, the Moses here of the climate movement, it tells us that there's no trend in cyclones. That's clear from the report. So obviously Michelle Bullock hasn't read those reports, but she's coming to these major conclusions, potentially affecting your interest rates and your home loan bills on the back of it. It's very concerning that she's not across the detail here, because that's simply not true. There is no evidence that cyclones are becoming more frequent over the past few years, and very little evidence then, of course, that they're necessarily going to become more expensive in the future. I think she went on to say, too, the reports I've read, is she went on to say that house prices could fall in areas of the country which are exposed to these climate change risks. Well, again, if that were the case, Michelle, why aren't we seeing those price reductions now? Because, I mean, you might think you're omniscient and know it all, but I reckon the people buying the properties in harbourside areas, and I noticed a lot of the people so alarmed about climate change themselves seem to like waterfront property and are willing to pay millions and millions of dollars for it. If they really did believe what they say, why are they buying houses near where the sea levels are just going to inundate those things within decades? Doesn't really add up, does it?
And what's so important actually about that graphic about fewer cyclones with global warming is that as soon as you acknowledge that truth, you're actually saying, look, maybe some parts of global warming are good, right? Fewer cyclones are good. But, you know, to actually say, no, it's the exact opposite, that is really freaking me out. I mean, data doesn't matter to a Reserve Bank governor. That is scary. Matt Canavan, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.